Good morning, everybody. It is Monday morning, October 23rd. I'm in Lewiston, Maine, with my daughter at a college revisit, so in a lovely hotel room. This week is skill video is about deconstructing discourse, normative claims, and the way that I the skill that I work to attend to when I'm listening to people, and especially thinking about the relationships they have with the stories that are influencing their lives, has to do with discourse. And I think the most accessible form of understanding discourse for me is this idea of those stories that are culturally taken for granted, that claim to represent the right way to understand something or how something should be understood. So the shoulds and the rights and those kinds of things are something I both listen for explicitly in the words that people use, but also in my imagination as people are talking. I'm trying to think about what the possible shoulds and rights could be in relation to that topic. So one of the things that's helpful in deconstructing is to expose the possible discourses when we're asking questions, relative influence questions. So something like, one thing I was thinking about for this was the discourse of showing care. So if somebody is experiencing something they feel is hurtful, they may likely be connected to a discourse that says that there's a right way for people to show that they care about their hurt. So, for example, a silly example with Ashley and me is when we were first together. At the end of the day, I would often leave my clothes that I wore that day on the floor next to the bed instead of putting in the hamper or hanging them up. And she would often sort of leave papers all over table surfaces around the house without sort of straightening up or putting them away. And these were sources of frustration for the two of us. She would get affected, understandably, by my pyramid of clothes next to my bed. And I would get affected by the clutter that was affecting me. And we had some arguments about this, some fights about this. And then we became curious about the stories that were available to us to understand, that were connected to the hurt that we were experiencing. And one of the stories that we exposed was that if we understood that what we were doing was hurting the other people, if I understood that not putting my clothes away was having a negative effect on her the other day, then the way I should show care is to change my behavior, to hang my clothes up, put them in the hamper at the end of the day, and the same way the other way around. If she, cared about the frustration I felt about the clutter, then the right way for her to show care would be to make sure that she was putting the papers away at the end of the day. And when we, instead just of being influenced by those stories and hurt by the ideas that the other person was coming up short of how they were supposed to show care, or the right way to show care, we got curious about each other's experiences of, curious about each other's experiences. And so I was able to share with Ashley that my lack of changing my behavior was not a result of not caring about her, but instead was a result of me really being at the limits of what I could handle in one day, and asking her to also understand that if I had to put my clothes away at the end of the day, I literally felt like life, that might be the straw that made life not worth living. And I became curious about her not putting clutters away when she knew it was bothering me, and she had a similar sense that it was just one too many responsibilities to try to do. And so when we understood each other's position on that, we talked about how we could show care in ways that didn't demand that we perform or just do what the other person would want us to do. So it wasn't, so the problem was our relationship to the story about the right way that care should be demonstrated. Now, that doesn't mean that that wouldn't be a legitimate story, that somebody could say that, look, the only way you can show me care is by doing what I require you to do. And that would then create, I think, a relational dilemma around whether or not that made the ongoing relationship tenable. And that another discourse is that relationships should always stay together no matter what. And that certainly is not a discourse that I support. I think there are many legitimate reasons for people to decide to end relationships. And so when you're in these conversations with people about their relationships to stories that they find problematic, I think finding skillful ways to name possible discourses about that are connected to shoulds and the right thing to do, like the value of being cared about. So those stories that Ashley and I were engaged with were exploiting our value to have our experience matter, have our experience cared about, have our feelings be listened to, and exploiting those really understandable values and hopes by saying that there was one right way that that could really be demonstrated. And that really constrained possibilities. And when we were able to deconstruct that, it opened up many other possibilities for us to relate to those moments. One was that we really realized that we much preferred to be together at the end of the day more than those two things, that there were many other things that we valued about each other, and we decided those were much more important than those other things. So I hope those examples help in some way, but I'd be interested in what you think. All right, have a good week, please, as best you can. You know, if life allows, be sure to turn in a reflection paper this week. Suzanne and Matt and I will be doing our last comments on your reflection papers before we rotate groups. You'll stay in your same group, but we will move to different ones. Hope you're all well. I miss talking to you, and remember that this coming Sunday is a mandatory gathering from, I believe, noon to 3 Eastern time. So it'll be great to see you all then. Bye.